Welcome to the Mytra Consulting webinar series, where industry insight meets practical strategy. At Mytra Consulting, we help organizations navigate growth, innovation, and transformation with confidence. In each session, we bring you expert perspectives, real-world solutions, and forward-thinking conversations designed to help leaders make smarter decisions and drive meaningful results. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's get started. All right, it is 1 o'clock, so we are going to get started with our webinar here this afternoon. I want to thank everyone for joining us, whether you're joining us live or through the recorded video version of our webinar series. My name is Chad Nickham. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Mytra Consulting. And today on the Mytra Consulting webinar series, we're going to be featuring Lori Cundy, and we're going to be talking about lessons learned and how we can lead every team towards a successful build. Lori brings over 30 years, 39 years, I think you had recently said as well. 38 years of experience in the industry. She is really excelling at forming lasting partnerships, designing customized solutions to help organizations. She actually founded her own company, Speedy Telecom, about 6 years ago, and represents over 270 different companies that provide unified communications, network infrastructure, security, and cloud solutions as well. Lori also was a senior account director for the Zayo Group and has also worked for other industry leaders such as Sprint, Quest, Cox Business Services, and AT&T as well. And so we are very pleased to have Lori on board with us at Mytra Consulting. And Lori's going to walk us through, again, lessons learned and some of the things that she's learned in her many years in the industry, and how sales and how marketing and how finance and everyone works together to make a build successful. So welcome, Lori, and the floor is yours.
All right. I appreciate it, Chad. Thank you. So yeah, as Chad said, I'm just started my 39th year in mostly sales, a lot of sales management, product development, some pricing development, but really everything kind of centered on how to get your sales over that threshold so that a customer is signing contracts and other people in the organization can then pick it up and work with your customer. So one of the things that we as Mytra really focus on are the processes that our customers have in place and how those processes are integrated within a system such that a process might pull on more than one discipline. You might have a salesperson who writes an order, but then you have service delivery who works to deliver the service. And service delivery has to coordinate with everybody, outside plant, inside plant, your tech force, all of your folks in finance to make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So, the point is, and what we're going to talk about some is that every successful build has a sales team that led it and that we have those relationships behind it. In no way am I saying that sales is the top of the pyramid, but rather that sales is really a downstream function that everything kind of flows toward. Part of what I did at during my tenure at Zayo was to work with the state higher ed system, which was called iLight. We were in Indiana, and we ended up winning a $35 million grant specifically for them. The grants that we're seeing today are so much bigger than this. But everything that you need to do, if you've got grant money, whether it's BEAD grant money or some state grant money, you still have to report back onto how you spent that money so that the feds know how successful the grant itself was. To give you a little bit of background on our $35 million grant, again, when I was at Zayo, when I started at Zayo, which was summer of 2008, they were actually being taken to court by the higher ed network because after Indiana Fiberworks, who Zayo had bought, had promised forever that they would provide dark fiber, they said, "Yeah, we're not going to do that anymore." And the higher ed networks, whatever state you're in, if you're in Ohio, it's Ornet. If you're in Michigan, it's Merit. You're in Wisconsin, it's Wisnet. iLight depends on funds from their own clients as well as some grants. And so they were literally had promised their customers that they could build fiber to all of these locations that iLight would then eventually light themselves. So they really had based their entire project on dark fiber. Suddenly, their key partner was saying that they were no longer going to do it. So, longest of story short, Zayo relented, and we partnered then with iLight. So, quite a turnaround from their taking us to court to they'll partner with us. But we partnered with them because they had a couple dozen uh, community college locations that they just didn't have fiber to, and nobody had fiber to them. They actually literally had some copper STSs or DS3s, whatever you want to call them, at some of these sites. So the most this campus could get was 45 meg. Whereas if you were an on-net campus from iLight somewhere else, you were probably getting 10 gig at a minimum. So we ended up partnering and built out fiber to a couple dozen of these community college sites. And specifically the routes we took, we knew did not have fiber optics going through them before. And when I tell you it was small town Indiana, we literally took fiber optic service through Gnawbone, Indiana. You can't even make that up. That was how small a towns we were going through in order to pick up census blocks that had underserved or unserved in terms of fiber optics. And so now we're going in there to put in the fiber optics so that internet service providers can come and use that service, just like Zayo could if they wanted to reach those customers. So at the end of the day, our grant application was successful because we had identified a community anchor institution that is a higher ed site, and we had identified a need, and we had a partnership that if Zayo had any problems with their money, we knew the partnership, being the state of Indiana, would not. So everything just got strengthened simply because we partnered on it. And the end result was about 650 miles of new fiber going to these couple dozen community college locations.
So believe it or not, I actually know where Gnawbone in Indiana is. So,
yeah, Gnawbone, Indiana.
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
to laugh because it's like small town.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you could, again, give us a little bit of a more, I know you're kind of talking about the lawsuit and all that stuff that was going into play. Anything else behind the scenes that the kind of led to that grant being taken care of? Things that you don't normally see.
Sort of. And here's the thing. If you have a customer, and this is for everybody on the call, not just salespeople, if your company has a customer that has the propensity to bill millions of dollars a year, somebody needs to be not just meeting with them, but meeting with them regularly. So when I first met with the folks at iLight, their network was the spitting image of the Indiana Fiber Works network, because basically Indiana Fiber Works was formed to build those first connectivity locations, specifically for Indiana University and Purdue University. So there was fiber that had been in place, but what we found was that because they had so many connections with Zayo, they always had issues that needed to be discussed. So again, if you got a customer that bills a lot of money, there is stuff that somebody needs to be paying attention to, whether that's your frontline salesperson or a customer service person, or even a technical field person. So some of the issues that we would talk about daily were any kind of billing issues. There are billing issues all the time. You have SLA credits. So if everything's going right, you still could have an SLA credit. They put in a new circuit, and the test and turn up happened on the 6th, but in fact, there were issues that occurred until the 20th. We need a billing credit from the 6th to the 20th. Somebody has to do that. So part of my role in working with iLight that had dozens of connections was to be that first point of contact, because then it was my job to go through Zayo to figure out who needed to help with whatever the issue was. So we literally started meeting once a week, and once a week we would go through billing issues, service issues, quarterly or business reviews showing all the trouble tickets, whether those were installation tickets, whether they were down hard tickets, whatever they were. And then we would also just go through things that were going to come about that I, as a vendor, should know about, just like all of my competitors should know about. But they would let me know what's going to be coming about and when, but without any detail because that's, against their MOU with the state. So literally after meet, I think they probably thought she says once a week she'll never be back. But after 73 weeks in a row of meeting once a week, they said, Lori's the real deal. She's not going anywhere. Let's do this partnership. So it really came down to the efforts of me and my sales leadership setting down with them. So I was meeting with the director regularly. Our VPs were talking to their VPs regularly. We had our CEO reach out to the chancellor of Indiana University. So all these things happened in the background that really set us up to be re-seen as the vendor that they had put their faith in a few years earlier. Does that answer that, Chet?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think it's good that showing that constant communication, and again building that rapport and that trust, with especially with anchor institutions in various
Exactly.
communities.
Yeah. So thank you for that. All right. So like I said, sales doesn't really sit at the top of the pyramid, and it would be really bad for me to say that it did since my career's in sales. The fact is, sales is kind of in the middle of all of the relationships with your finance and your legal people, with leadership, outside plant, marketing, biz dev, any of your field people. And the communication, in my opinion, between the salespeople and all those folks can make or break the salesperson's ability to thrive in a marketplace. So, the ability of the salesperson to wrangle all the resources is directly in sync with how successful they are. So let's talk a little bit about some of these things. So, and I'm going to focus a little bit on the grant that we got, that $35 million grant. We saw the demand, but we worked with leadership, obviously, and talking to those folks at Indiana University and ILITE, and they agreed that they needed a single point of contact, me, the salesperson, but a single point of accountability. And that person became our COO. So if I had issues getting anything out of anybody at Zayo, I had a direct line to him because that was his commitment to them, was giving me any and all of the support I needed to get day-to-day things done on a reasonable basis. Another thing that when you think about how salespeople are interfacing with their leadership, we're the ones who can tell if we're getting behind the eight ball and not getting things turned around because we have staffing issues. And I'll give you an example of this. Sometimes salespeople will simply put up a request for a quote that requires outside plant to look at it to determine any build costs, fiber engineering to look at it to ensure that there's fiber around on the other side of the build. You need your engineering to tell you if there's ports available back at the head end. So all of these things can happen. And in order to get past the situations where you don't have fiber available and where you have to build fiber, somebody on the ground has to tell leadership if you've got the right folks in place or not. Simply put, there should never be if you're a multi-state network and you have a tech that has to drive 400 miles to get to the customer, you probably need another tech in another location. So your staffing not only has to do with your monies that you're expecting to come in and fiber you need to build, but also just how long it would take to service that once it's in. So another point that I want to make about this is that especially when salespeople are coordinating, it's up to us, absolutely salespeople, to be talking to finance and engineering and business development. The simple point of this is that we need our finance people to give us a price that'll work. We need marketing to be supporting our efforts with that long-term vision of the company. We need business development to help us if we don't have fiber where it's at. And we need engineering to put it all together for them. So I've seen a company that is wildly successful who does everything that has to do with their service delivery in a Google sheet. So they've got literally a Google Excel sheet that says how many ports they have available at, let's say, at Boise, Idaho, in that pop. If they know that they have an order for a 10 gig circuit and they have a port available, that is absolutely the first thing that goes up is the green flag saying, hey, we can turn this up right away. It works for them, but they do one thing and one thing only, and that is IP ports out of data centers. If you're doing a lot of fiber builds, an Excel sheet is not going to help you keep up. It's time that you start looking at a company such as a Visiport or a Vetro, or connected to fiber, somebody who helps you make sense of your own assets and where they need to be go forward. Oops, sorry. Oh, sorry guys, I'm having trouble with my thing putting my slide forward. All right, so biz dev. I'm going to make a joke, and I hope nobody takes offense, especially if they're in biz dev. But I literally used to say, biz dev is sales without quota. That's kind of mean, and it's a little mean spirited. But the fact is that sales is there to sell your product where you have fiber. Biz dev is there to develop areas where you don't, and to help your leadership make a firm decision about whether or not to start adding fiber in a location. Anybody on this call who applied for grants and money knows where they need fiber because you did that due diligence. Biz dev needs to be the folks that are working constantly on new markets to open. The best thing, in my opinion, the best thing that biz dev folks can do is identify all of those community anchor institutions in an area where they think they have a solution. Now, here's the thing. If you're in this business, you know that just because your biz dev folks point to an area and say, hey, there's a whole school district, 5 buildings, okay, you still got to build to the 5 buildings. And if it's a high school, they probably are getting funded through the Universal Service Fund. If they did that, they had to tell the feds how long they signed for. So just because you could put fiber somewhere doesn't mean they're going to be able to use that fiber for years. They simply could be under contract or not have the money to do it. But engaging with multiple community anchor institutions along those routes will tell you if a new area is viable or not. So ways to do that are simply to engage with the community. If you have any advertising budget and you can focus television in small areas, terrific. I'm finding that having, I call them table tents, but they sit by the road, the big lanyards that say, hey, we're building in your area, give us a call. Those things come in handy. What really, really helps, in my opinion, is to have the community interest developed by feet on the street, doing mail hooks, whatever you need to call them, when you put them on their doors, pay interns $10 an hour to go out and just drum up this business and get the community interested in what you're doing. The next step, though, is to use your CRM, and I put in here relentlessly. You've got to have the names of people who are at those CIIs, their titles. They're verified to be the CFO or the CEO. Again, the pipeline's only as good as the data behind it, but you need to start filling in that CRM so that when you move the fiber that way and sales is ready to sell it, they've got a list of people to go after. The folks who I find will be the best people to reach are literally all of your field people. So techs, outside plant people, frankly, all of them talk to each other. Doesn't matter that they're competitors. They all yak with each other. And they know where people need more fiber optics and where areas of fiber are lacking. And they're the best ones to give you some information. And then finance and legal. This is a big deal. If you received grant funding sometime or receiving it this year or sometime next year, you might not have considered when you wrote the grant application providing 100 gig or 400 gig circuits. You might not have thought about providing waves, dark fiber. So there are probably some models that you gave to the government that are simply not going to match. So for example, if what you really told the government you're going to do with money is build Ethernet circuits and IP circuits, well, eventually those things have to be on the waves, and you might as well go ahead and provide waves to customers who would like them. But you have to have a way to strategize your pricing to match. So, if you never provided a 100 or 400 gig wave, you probably want to reach out to some folks that you know in other areas and see what people are paying outside of your area in order to do that. And again, you need these kind of things in a CRM system. If you have a client who's at 123 Main Street and your fiber is 2 miles off of Main Street, you need to be able to look in there and see what it's going to cost to get that built to them. So tracking your cost by foot, how many new pedestals you would have, how many hand tools, splice cases, is everything built? Are you underground or below ground? What are we going to do? All of these things need to be worked through with sales and often biz dev, talking directly to the finance and legal people so that you have discounts built in that match what you told the government you were going to do, so that you have new services built in, maybe that you didn't tell the government you were going to do, and a way to know which of your target clients are close to your network and which are not. So the CRM system rules in that case.
One question I had when we were talking about finance, um, one thing that comes to mind is basically what does sales need to ask finance? What
Yeah.
kind of information do they need to provide to finance? What deal are you trying to get internally? And so what kind of questions do you think really comes about that you need to have that information before you proceed?
Yeah, so there are certain things that your salespeople, and this comes from your sales management and your upper levels in sales, your salespeople need to be able to go to their finance people and understand not just what the customer is attempting to buy, but they need to understand the price that will work for the customer. They need to be able to tell your pricing, and you might call them product managers, you might call them pricing managers. You need to be able to tell these people when the customer wants to make a decision, what service and price they're paying today, when that contract is up, what their decision making process is, who signs the contract, and are they going to be available, and really what's their time frame to buy. Now I'm going to tell a story, and this is a true story, and I would really just be embarrassed if this particular person was on the call, but it's a great story from the sales trenches. I had a rep who was trying to get a deal done with a customer, presented the price. The customer said, price is too high. So the rep went to pricing and said, hey, can I get 7 or 8% off? And pricing said, yeah, okay. He went back. Customer said, price is too high. Back and forth several times until the rep literally lamented to me, his boss, and said, finance keeps giving me what I need and the customer's not buying. And I said, did you ask the customer what it'll take? And he said, no, I just kept taking money off. I said, why don't you start with what the customer will pay for it? And then finance will tell you if they can tolerate that or not. And the point of that being, if you tell a customer what's it going to take, and the customer says $1 and you get $1, you need to go out there with contracts for them to sign, because you got them to where they needed to be. The other thing, though, too, is that finance and legal and sales all need to have a meeting of the minds when it comes to contract negotiation. Specifically, every contract that's out there has commercial terms and it has financial terms. The commercial terms are simply, this is how we do business. If you want to order something, you have to send an order. If you do that, we will acknowledge the order. The order form itself would have the pricing, and they can agree on that. Now you have, so those are the commercial terms. What are we buying? Are there any things we need to add into the contract, such as portability? We want to sign a 3-year contract because we like the 3-year rate, but our lease on the building's up in 2 years. If we have to move, can we move? Yeah, portability. That's a commercial term. Meaning it doesn't really come down to the lawyers to say yes or no. Sales and finance and product people need to be saying yes or no to commercial terms. Then your legal folks can go in and wrap the legalese around it. Now, I will say that as attorneys go, I think we've lucked out in our industry. By the time our attorneys get involved, all those commercial aspects have been hammered out, and we just need language to match. I have never had an attorney get in the middle of a deal to make it not work. By the time they get there, you're at the last minute and we're trying to close this thing. They absolutely want to work with everybody, including the customer, to make it work. So point being, salespeople should not be standoffish about engaging legal. They should just go in up front and say, this is what I need. If you can give me this, they said they'll sign, and then move on and get it done. Hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, no offense to the rep who didn't do his job right. Anyway,
So
next
so
one.
one other question is we're talking about finance and legal.
Yeah.
And you discussed some different things as far as legal agreements and pricing.
Mhm.
Why do you think it is so important for sales, finance, and legal to be having those conversations long before the very first customer is even sitting across the table?
Yeah, it's important because, generally speaking, what your company, wherever you work, what your company expects from you is that you're all being above board and straightforward. But sometimes you need to have the folks at finance and legal understand that things that have worked in the past for on net locations don't work when it comes to having a build. And so, for example, if we were going to put together an agreement that requires a 1 mile build, it's not terribly difficult, but as everybody knows, things can get in the way. So maybe our legal folks need to put some language around the fact that we understand there's a bill and we might not meet their target due date. Typically, your master agreements or your service schedules come with some information about once you hit that due date, that's your date. But you and I all know sometimes things get missed. So the folks in finance and legal need to be working through all of the scenarios that could occur around a particular deal, not just in general. Simply because as you're building out your network and you're going into new areas, you're going to run into things that you've never considered before. You might have you might have to get permits, right away permits, in a very small town that hasn't had anybody ask for a permit in 5 years, and they don't even know what to do. So your folks talking and working through all those can really help bring the various heads together so that they get things done for the customer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That answers that question.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, next one. For oops, I need to go back up. Sorry, marketing. All right, I'm gonna go out on a very narrow limb here and say that sales and marketing do not in any way, shape, or form belong together. It drives me bonkers when I hear somebody's title is VP of Sales and Marketing. So how in the world does somebody become a VP of two specific disciplines that are completely miles apart? And what I mean is, marketing is long term execution of brand strategy. It is, it's the price, product, placement, it's all those things that happen in the background. And the fact is, marketing has very long, very big budgets to continue to tell the story about how great a company is. Sales, on the other hand, is a short term execution of strategy. It is top line finance to the company. It is money coming in and it belongs under finance. Marketing, its own discipline. Finance and sales, their own discipline. And I say that simply because I don't believe it's possible for one person to be very good at both sales and marketing. So if what your company needs is sales, if you need top line revenue, then you focus on your sales. If you're trying to make a splash in the market for some technology that you're working on that might be viable 3 years from now, that's a marketing discipline. So when you have your marketing people themselves working on things, obviously you want to start aiming their marketing at where you have plant today. So this is kind of outside of the biz dev area, but rather if you know you have fiber in Boise, Idaho, then you want to go sell fiber in Boise, Idaho. If you don't have any in Des Moines, Iowa, maybe that's a biz dev effort. But your marketing folks need to be helping build out that map of where you have the fiber to sell on, how many communities you would be welcome in to come and tell that story, whether it's going to Chamber of Commerce breakfast or city council meetings, board of development meetings, meeting with the school board, hoping to pitch that long-term sale. Everything comes down to marketing being focused on what you have today. So again, biz dev is where you're going to be tomorrow. But then they also can help with those things such as your sandwich board, signage, curb signs, wherever your crews are building, whether it's in territory that you have and they're just adding fiber, or if they're going into all new places, any of that signage needs to carry every way they can get a hold of you. And then once it's done, when they've gotten a hold of you, you need to start having a way to put those into your CRM system. Now, one of the things that you'll find is that if you're building out for commercial entities and you put out signage, you're going to get a lot of calls from residential folks who do not have good service. And I actually had one who wanted me to come out and pitch to their condo board because nobody had good internet in the whole condo. But the condo board wouldn't let me in. They had their own contracts with their own folks. What I could do for them was make them aware that there would be something better and it's coming down the pipe pretty quick. But the fact is you're going to get residential calls, but I wouldn't do away with those if you don't do residential service. What I would do would be partner with somebody who does. So if all you're doing is middle mile backbone fiber, you need to find yourself some good UCAS or CCAS providers, folks that do cloud, cybersecurity, AI. Have those folks start partnering with your salespeople because they're the ones who can provide some kind of other things that you're simply not doing. Now, obviously, if you have a whole sales brochure and you cover all that, don't partner, but be aware that those people will be in your backyard as well.
So Lori,
Mhm.
one thing as we're talking about marketing that has always kind of driven me crazy
Mhm.
is that a lot of times marketing gets brought in after construction starts.
Yeah.
And you and I've talked in the past that we really both believe that we make the case that it really should be involved much earlier in the process. So, what are some
Yep.
different examples of marketing activities that you think can actually help speed up a successful deployment?
Okay. One of the major things that I've seen, it sounds so easy, but where I saw us get the most bang for our buck was very simple billboards and sandwich boards and signage in the area that we were already working. Now, obviously, marketing would have already pointed us to that area because that's where we're working. But it's marketing then that has to kind of own all of those marketing collateral materials. And I don't care if they make them sandwich boards or if we mail something to everybody's house that has a magnet for the refrigerator and a pen, as long as marketing is getting the word out there and then people have a way to contact back into our company, whether for residential or enterprise type service. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So let's talk about outside plant and field engineering. Now I'm going to make another, I don't think, bold statement. If your salespeople are not best friends with your outside plant, field engineering, and their own field techs who are in their backyard, shame on your salespeople. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, and I am not making these up. I 10 years at Zayo, and I had some fabulous outside plant guys. And one story that I will tell is that I had a customer who called a little panicky on a Monday, and they said, "Hey, that order for Hamilton something, I got to have it by Friday. I haven't seen a due date." I said, "I haven't seen an order. I don't know what you're talking about." He had not ordered it. He gave it to somebody in his company to order it for me, and she dropped the ball and actually no longer worked there. He assumed it was all going through. So now we have a client who is committed to having service at their customer the following Monday. So if we drop the service on Friday, they have the weekend to do their thing. And all of a sudden, we are not there. Now, we had fiber right around the area. So the first thing I did was go, because I know we got to do a maintenance notification if we're going to be splicing somebody into existing fiber. That's 5 days at least. I went to outside plant and I said, "Is there anything that can help me get past the maintenance notification?" My good friend in outside plant, tap, tap, tap. You know what? We actually got a maintenance window out for that area for Friday night, something unrelated. I'm not going to get in the way. Well, now I have to go to pricing management and ask for a price for this dark fiber pair, knowing that the customer is in a bind. And what I don't want to do is let product know that the customer's in a bind because maybe they'll gouge them on the price, frankly. So I said, first thing, we're not gouging them on the price. They're in trouble enough. Let's get this done. And they came back with a terrific price. Client signed it that afternoon on a Monday, put it through. Everything was good. And their stuff was up and working. Now, obviously, if I had not worked with the folks in outside plant ever, you can't go and ask them for favors. But if you're always engaging them so that they know, here are the things that Lori in sales is working on, they suddenly have a little more skin in the game simply because they know about it. And I'm going to give you another example, again, outside plant, same bunch of folks. I had a field tech came into my office and he said, I am having some trouble with this one order of yours. All it was a simple little dark fiber lease that ran about a mile and a half. And I said, why? And he said, nothing in that manhole is what is in my records. Nothing's the same. Our records are bad. So I start typing, type. I said, oh yeah, you know what? That's the West Side overbuild. And he said, what's that mean? I said, about a year and a half ago, one of your peers had to swing a bunch of fibers off of the long haul route. So he swung them on the metro route, eating up all the metro fibers. But then he swung them all back. He said, how do you know? I said, because I had the pre and post KMZ. He said, send them to me. So I did. 3 weeks later, he came in. He said, you know that West Side overbuild thing? And I said, yeah. He said, you saved me 14 splices and $40,000 with those two KMZs. Now, that's the kind of thing that you want to be having conversations with your folks about. How can I save you money? How can you save me money? I promise you, more than once, I have gone to an outside plant person and asked them for how they can find some better way of getting costs out of a deal because the pricing team can't give me the price I need. Well, you know what? The good outside plant guys, and if you know them, you've seen them, they'll call up one of their subcontractors and say, hey, look, I've got a big project. I want to give you some of it. I can't give you all of it, but you got to sharpen your pencil because I need you to get under a price over on this project. I promise I'll give you both, but you got to cut me some slack. And your outside plant guys will do that all day long if they know to ask for it. And the only way they know to ask for it is if your salespeople are saying, man, I'm in a bind. Customer can't pay $5,000 a month. If I could get $400 a month off of this, I can make it work. Well, then they can go back and figure out their numbers, go back to your finance people and let the deal go through. Another thing that your good OSP people will do that your salespeople really appreciate is they will give all of their contractors absolute latitude to drop splice points and slack anywhere they're doing a build. Why? Because they're passing a community anchor institution. If you folks are out there building fiber 2 miles down a road and at the 1 mile mark they see a school, I would expect to see splice and slack so that I can go call on that school. I would also expect something to trigger in the CRM system saying, hey, we just passed Joe Blow K through 12. You need to go be talking to Joe Blow K through 12 because we have fiber in front of them now. Your subcontractors and any of your outside plant people really do need to have your customer relationship management software in their pocket as a mobile app so that they can send those kind of uploads and information to the salespeople. The next point on that is that anywhere that you're building it's a new route and it needs to be documented in a pipeline so that you know how many homes you're passing if you're in residential, but also, how many businesses are you passing with that new fiber? It needs to be sticking up there. Again, if you have issues with your own CRM system or your fiber management system, talk to the folks at Mytra. We've got solutions for you that we have vetted and that we're comfortable sharing with all of our folks who need help with their own inventory management systems. All right, again, you can't order more crews, so you have to sell where you can build it. If you can't add people, you have to make better use of the ones that you have. So there are estimates now, just based on all of the grants, all of the BEAD money, all this money that's being thrown around to the states to build out fiber in the US, that we would literally need 200,000 more people trained in fiber deployment to make this happen. I don't see us finding 200,000 people who can do that. But what we can do is slice and dice our own service delivery manners so that we get more done that impacts not just our own sale, but those of other clients. So if you're looking at getting permits ready because you have to go in and ask for permits in order to do your build, make sure that it's fully designed and that everything that can be accounted for in that build has been accounted for so that you don't ever have to send a crew back to extend by 50 feet or add a splice point in front of a building All of those things should be sought out so that you don't duplicate your own efforts later, but also so that you can deliver earlier to your clients. A number of the BEAD applications that I've seen have really worked on partnerships by, working with some of their community colleges, technical schools, vocational schools. All of those things are thriving in large part because they have broadband connectivity, but even some of them are in, rural enough places they don't have it really good. And that's a terrific partnership for somebody to start working on if you're trying to get into any of those markets. Right. So one team for the relationship sales has to lead. Our team here at Mytra is me working on sales and marketing strategy. We work all day long with folks on things like your pricing and how to get a price out for if you've got a off net deal. How quickly can you get a price out? Every member of the organization can theoretically touch an off net deal. So what Mytra does is we help you go through what is coming from your leadership down that impacts your ability to turn up service and therefore bring in revenue. That's what I do. Ernie Haltry is our compliance and infrastructure guy, and he has a broad depth of just so much knowledge about BEAD programs, government policy, how things are moving through our governments and what monies are coming to our states. And he can, with a push of a button, tell you how much money your state has received in grant money in the last year. And then we have Chad, who introduced me. Chad is our chief marketing officer. He works on all kinds of things for Mytra itself, but he also can do those for your organization. If you need folks who in marketing who need help with social media, press releases, sandwich boards, newsletters, all that type of thing, we're definitely here for to help you with all of that. Again, the point of this is that sales is going to be leading when it comes to new areas and new clients to build to. Sales owns those relationships, but they depend on everybody else in that organization to get the pricing done, get the service installed, get it billed correctly, keep it up and working. So if anything, encourage your salespeople to start making friends with every other discipline in the organization. I promise you it will be to their betterment. It was to mine. And I still look back at my days at Zayo and I think every outside plant guy and every tech guy saved my life on more than one occasion, and I thank them for it. And that's kind of that's the attitude that I think helps in our industry, helps you get more wins under your pocket, is when everybody is preaching from the same songbook and singing the same song. Have your salespeople work with biz dev, have them work with outside plant, finance, marketing, leadership, have them all do it. You guys should be talking to each other as often as you can and about every subject you can come up with. I promise it will help. Any questions from anybody? I'll be happy to field them.
Yeah, and actually, you can list any questions you have in the chat, and we'll get those to Lori. Lori, one of the big hot topics, of course, over the past year, 6 months, has been BEAD, and we've had a lot of focus on BEAD and BEAD funding. Your message today really kind of applies whether an organization received funding or not. And where do you see the biggest growth opportunities over the next 2 to 3 years for providers that really stay proactive in this whole process?
I think the biggest opportunities are going to come from these areas where BEAD money is being spent to develop the fiber backbone. Like I said, when we started working with iLight and we had these couple dozen schools that we needed to build to, I mean, literally, some of them were limping along on cable modems. And the difference between going from what we used to think of as broadband, a DSL line or a cable modem, and going to a true, dedicated, non-shared, asymmetric fiber connection it's such a huge difference to them. But then also not just higher ed, but any community anchor institution. So think your hospitals, your law enforcement, obviously your schools, K through 12, as well as your colleges. All of those folks who work with them have their fingers on the pulse of their own community way more than anybody outside of your organization, or I mean, inside of your organization. And so the important thing is that you gain that understanding, sales and other folks, of what they have today and where they could be if they had better service, frankly. And everything kind of then builds from that, wherever they are. So I think where the big growth is going to come from these folks who have never had true fiber fed services to take advantage of before. Now they will. Things that they have never touched, apps they've never even thought of doing because their own infrastructure won't support it, they can do forever. And I promise you, there are places where your people on their cell phones have better service than they do on that cable modem. So now all of a sudden you can do things better at your desktop in these new build areas than you used to be able to do.
Yeah, one of the things that you had discussed earlier when talking about kind of getting everyone on board, and then talked about the different sandwich boards and things like that.
Mhm.
Marketing as the build is going on. Um, what's your feeling about your outside plant and engineering? Because a lot of times those folks come across sales opportunities even before sales actually gets that opportunity as they're
Yep.
doing their build. What's your feeling on that about empowering those teams to kind of help generate those business opportunities?
Yep, and I think you're exactly right in that our outside plant guys and field techs often will come across opportunities. And here's the thing, in theory, the best thing that could happen would be that those people who uncover the opportunity could enter it into a CRM system as a simple prospect for somebody to call on. And if your CRM system's tight, that would then trickle down to a salesperson who would pick up the phone and call the folks. That's a little harder done than said because they've got their own lives as well. I can oftentimes I would just have an outside plant guy pick up the phone and call me and say, "Hey, so and so at Broadview High School needs something to replace a cable modem. Give them a call." And that's okay for one salesperson and one or two outside plant guys in an area. But where you've got a lot of building going on, even if whether it's with bead money or not, you've got to have some way that everybody agrees that new prospects will be entered into a CRM. So everybody agree one. Leadership then becomes essential. And what I mean by that is if you've got folks who just aren't going to enter stuff into the CRM system, even though it's their job to enter that info, leadership needs to have a talk with that person. It's not my job to tell somebody to fix their salesforce.com entries, but it is my boss's job if that person works for them as well. So not only do you have to have the folks all being ready and able to enter information in, then you have to have somebody who can follow up with that information to make sure that somebody in sales was contacted. Again, whether it's residential or business, those are two different things, and you have to have two different ways of looking at it. But somebody has to work out a CRM system that easily supports a new prospect in a new area with new fiber. Let's go talk to them. What do we need? So, name of the business, name of the contact, any information that anybody will get. What do they have today? If they've got a 10 meg and it's really just a bunch of bonded T1s, that's a different piece of information than they have a fiber fed gig circuit. So more information, the better. But again, it kind of comes down to everybody agreeing this is what needs to be done and entered for the business, regardless of my discipline, whether I'm outside plant, attack, or sales. If I run across a prospect, this is what I have. And then lastly, oftentimes leadership can do things like run internal contests. Who sent the most leads to sales? And sales can qualify them. If a customer's not ready to buy today, that doesn't mean it's not a good lead. It means somebody needs to contact them a year from now when they are ready to buy. So a simple internal contest can do that. And again, if you've got folks who all talk to each other, it makes it so much easier. I don't know how to overstate that. Your sales, outside plant, and your field techs need to be friends.
So when we're talking about these builds and bead really can kind of come into play and different
Mhm.
grants through time, but you have some smaller providers that are awarded these grants, and usually with these smaller providers, you have limited staff. You have
Yeah.
staff members that wear a lot of different hats.
Yep.
So where should the focus be first to really have the biggest impact for the company?
For the smaller providers who now are getting, in some cases, millions of dollars to spend, the focus needs to be on identifying all of those community and anchor institutions. But then there's got to be a focus on everybody entering things the very same way. Um, those placards that you set out by your van when you're building fiber that say, "Hey, we've got BEAD money and we're building new fiber for you." Those are going to find a lot of folks calling in saying, "I want service." Um, when when you're out in a whole new area, and kind of go back to the beginning of the slides, biz dev probably found the area because sales said, "Man, I wish I could sell something over there." Sales said that, biz dev said this, and all of a sudden now fiber engineering's trying to figure out what it'll cost, outside plants giving in their cost per foot dollar. And so everybody's kind of looking in the same direction, but that CRM system means that everybody's seeing the exact same info. And so it needs to be good, solid info, and everybody needs to, frankly, have their feet held to the fire to input that correctly. Anytime that you've got a number of people who are all looking at the same building, it can be fairly disastrous because, for example, you don't count on the salespeople who said that DMARC's in the first floor data room of the 12-story building. It might not be. If the tech goes out there and he says, "Hey, guess what? The actual DMARC's on the fourth floor," that means something needs to be upgraded in the CRM system. And it could be that one of the things that your business will do is to limit the number of people who can update certain aspects of a client profile. So, for example, I remember at a company that I previously worked with where nobody could change the physical address without somebody, a paralegal, getting involved, because it showed changing a physical address meant something major had changed in that company. Maybe they changed their corporate site. But we would get legal involved simply to ensure that, one, everything was above board because the customer had already signed contracts under the company name at X address. Well, now he says he's at Y address, so we need something to prove it. And I actually had a case where a customer was changing names because a court had ordered them to. And there's a lot more to it. And someday I'll tell everybody about it. But they were under non-disclosure. So I had to go to Zayo Legal and say, "Hey, we need to change this bill name." They have exactly 3 more weeks before they can no longer use the previous name. So we need to change it. And they said, "Okay, well, tell us, show us that they've changed things in their own information that they filed with the Secretary of State." So all of their corporate filings. And I said, "Well, I can't because they're under non-disclosure." Now, had I not worked at Zayo for years before this conversation, it probably wouldn't have gotten done. But eventually the billing rep understood the situation and said, "Okay, we're gonna change the bill name." Usually, though, that kind of thing wouldn't happen. But again, if all of the folks who touch a client are all entering the same information, understanding the same information, pulling the same information out, then all of the folks can tell the same thing to the folks who are buying your product. So I guess I can't overstate everybody using the CRM system or your fiber management system like a Visiport or a Vetro. Everybody has to use it the same way, and it has to be accurate. That's the main thing that I would say.
Okay. Well, and to kind of wrap things up, the topic today was lessons learned, and well, a lot of times we learn by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess if you could point to one mistake that broadband providers consistently make during these large infrastructure projects, what would you say that is, and how can they avoid that mistake?
Yeah, I'm gonna. This is kind of a wacky one, but as you were asking the question, I flashed back, and I won't name a city name because that would probably be rude. But when we were working on the engineering and permitting of our 635-mile build. We literally we were meeting with city councils, county councils, we were mayor's offices, community development, economic development. And we had a single town that said, we haven't really had need for permits and that kind of thing. How about we do this? You guys can bring your fiber through here, but you have to give us 12 strands and interconnect all of our city buildings with those 12 strands. So now I think of that as extortion. And I said to the lead on our stimulus build project, screw them, let's build right around it. I don't need to go through that tiny little town that bad. Now, if you've ever done one of these grants, it can be a nosebleed to submit a change form to the feds. I was more than happy to work on the form because I was angered that they would ask us to give them something for free instead of simply paying, a few $100 for a permit. The problem was that the outside plant lead on the stimulus bill, did not want to do that change form. So what he ended up doing was simply overlashing 12 fibers, and those were what were given to the city. I still don't think it was right. I still think it was extortion. And we wouldn't have even suspected that a town would do that, but they did. And I guess if anything, if I were going to say lessons learned and things to avoid, is have a way that your team up through leadership, our leader was our CEO, that everybody agrees on. If a change needs to be made, everybody understands why. Maybe you simply couldn't get a permit for a town, so you don't go through there, you go around. As long as everybody understands, then you don't need to shoot your own self in the foot to make a little town happy. And this is one of those, I wish we had known beforehand what the contract change process was like, because we could have just said no, and I could have just frankly done the paperwork, but we didn't know at the time. So lesson learned is if you're working with the feds, be aware of what you need to do to be in compliance with whatever they want, but don't give away the store because it's easier to make it compliant, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we want to thank everyone for your time today. Thank you for attending. Again, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to any of us at Mytra Consulting. You can go to mytraconsulting.com, click on the different consultants. If you have questions in certain areas, schedule meetings. We easily will do a call with you, what we call a discovery call. That's absolutely free of charge, and kind of work out a way that we can help your team and help you get past some of those obstacles that you're looking at here in the near future, or one that you're dealing with today. We can help, and we definitely have the resources to be able to do that as well. So any parting shots for you today, Lori?
Oh, just want to thank everybody for their time. This is also has been recorded, so feel free to pull it up and share it with other folks in your organization. We'd love to work with everybody.
All right. Thank you. Once again, thank you all for attending. Again, this is part of the Mytra Consulting webinar series, and we'll see you next time on the next series right here with Mytra Consulting. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Mytra Consulting webinar series. We hope today's discussion provided valuable insight and actionable ideas you can apply within your organization. At Mytra Consulting, we're committed to helping leaders turn challenges into opportunities and strategy into success. Be sure to stay connected for future webinars, and until next time, thank you for being part of the conversation.